Well, today I've been working on the tractor getting ready for farming. You can hear the geese and the ducks out in the pond. They're just deciding to steal the shell. I want to talk about something real quick. I get a lot of questions about real estate. I get a lot of, what would you do if you had to do it over again? What kind of property would you own? And a lot of people, you know, they see the laundromats and they see all that money and they go, man, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what, if you're new to real estate and you have no equity, you have no property, no credit at all, you're going to have a hard time getting a laundromat unless you run into a Danny D'Angelo situation where someone just has to unload it and they're looking for somebody, let's sit down, looking for somebody that's young. They're looking for somebody that is willing to run their laundromat and they'll split the profit with you. But before we talk about that, the thing you got to understand with all the different types of real estate is, whether it's single family, apartment buildings, farm ground, laundromats, commercial businesses, commercial triple net, the less headache, the less work you have, the more that investment is going to cost you and the less return you're going to make on your money. So I'll give you an example, like Ben Mal, if you watch his channel, he's huge, he's multi-millionaire. He buys great big shopping centers for 30, 40, 50 million, 10 million. His return is 7% or 6%. Good return, but he's spending 20 million, so he doesn't have to do a whole lot of work. You and I, or people even just starting out, when you're buying a single family house that costs you $20,000 or $120,000 or $200,000 where you're at, and yes, there are single family homes in the United States that cost $20,000. They're just not on the East Coast or the West Coast. They're usually in the Rust Belt or the Midwest or the upper north part where people don't want to live. They take more work. So they're going to give you a good return, but you're going to have to work really hard and you're going to be it's very management intensive. So that's why if you're not ready for that, that type of property is going to eat you up also. But if you don't have a lot of equity, you don't have a lot of credit, sometimes that's where you got to start. You got to start at the bottom and work your way up. And so I started at the bottom and worked my way up. I started with a house that cost me $1,600, a 3-bedroom house. And that was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was a repo. It was in a bad part of town. I rented at Section 8, where I'm at in the Midwest. I got $700 a month rent. It cost me $2,000 to fix it up. I had $3,600 of my own money in this house. That's all it cost me, and I got equity in it. Now, once I got it rented, the bank saw I could do this. Then I went and I used it as equity. I didn't pull money out. I used it as collateral to buy the next dumpy house. I did that for 4 or 5 houses. Then all of a sudden, I was able to buy better houses. I had more money saved up. I was able to go faster. So instead of just buying 1 house a year, I was buying 3 and then 4 and then 5. And all of a sudden, I had 30 properties. I had a duplex. I had an apartment building. I had a bunch of stuff. And in came the laundromats. Okay? What happened was I was tired of fixing toilets. I was tired of fixing water heaters. I was tired of having 30 tenants or 30 different individual tenants. And actually I had more than that because I had an apartment building that was a 6-unit. I had a duplex or 2. So you had more than 30 tenants. And I was tired of that rigmarole. I knew there was something better. So I was trying to get into commercial real estate the cheap way. I found a cheap laundromat that they owned the building. They didn't want a whole lot. They had a few other storefronts to rent out. Here I am. Okay? That may not be your situation, but that's how I kind of got going. Now, the thing I warn people about is when they tell me, oh, they're going to buy a rental house. And sometimes they skip step 1. Like Dave Ramsey calls it baby steps. I call it cutting your teeth. If you've never owned rental property, you've never rented a house, you've never built anything, you've never worked on anything, you're not going to go out and buy 20 of anything, or you're not going to go out and buy a great big apartment building because you may not have the equity and you won't have the knowledge to run it to the point where you're successful. You'll end up failing faster than you'll succeed. So you have to be cautious. And the trick I use for such endeavors is I make sure that I'm never overextended so that, like, say you owned 1 house and it wasn't going well and you hated it. If you're not overextended, you can sell it, you can unload it and get away from it and start over. If you're overextended, you buy the really fancy house in a really fancy neighborhood and you can barely make the payments and it's not worth what you paid for it, well, then you have a situation like the credit crisis of 2008. People were buying homes that weren't worth what they said they were worth, and they were buying things they couldn't afford, and they got stuck with them. And that can happen at any time. That's not a one-time thing. It happens all the time. There's a reason there's repos on the market. It's because people don't understand what they're doing. They get carried away. So don't get carried away. And the other question I get is, what would you recommend? I would recommend sticking with what you know. So everybody has talent, everybody has skill. If you understand certain parts of single family real estate, maybe get one property, get started. But understand that you need to grow later. If you don't want to own a bunch of single family rentals, I would definitely not own a bunch of single family rentals, mainly because it is a pain. It's a management nightmare is what it is. And so a lot of people I know that own lots of them, they end up growing up and getting up to 4 units, 6 units, 12-unit apartment buildings. They sell those properties once they're paid for. They use that cash to put down on something nicer. As you go through real estate, you outgrow stuff. You outgrow your investments, you outgrow your realtor, you outgrow your banker, you outgrow your insurance agent. You will actually transition to different levels of people as you go through your career. I had a realtor, he didn't understand commercial property. I had to get a different realtor. My insurance agent, they couldn't insure laundromats, so I had to get a broker. I'd never had an insurance broker. Got hell of a deal. Great insurance, great company. It's not cutthroat stuff, it's not junk. But my point is, you'll outgrow people as you go. So that's another thing you need to understand when you go through real estate. That's what a lot of these gurus don't tell you. You outgrow it, you find different people to help you find the deals. That takes me into talking about the deals. How do you find them? That's another question I get. How do I find these deals? I hunt like crazy. When I'm driving around my properties, I'm always looking. I'm always looking for the signs that this might come up for sale. There's a for sale sign or somebody doesn't want it. I have a bunch of realtors I know, and they all know I'm interested in certain things. And they'll email me, they'll call me, they'll text me. That's the way you're going to find out. You got to go out and start looking for it. It is not going to just find you one day, show up to your office or your work or your house and say, hey, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, I want you to buy me. That is not going to happen. If you don't chase for this stuff, you're never going to find it. If you give up after the first time someone tells you no, you're also not going to succeed, because I've been told no a lot. I even cold call with farm ground. It's near me. When I find farm ground and I buy it and I see a neighbor hasn't paid their taxes, I call them and say, hey, you looking to sell? Oh, well, here's why I called you. You didn't pay last year's tax bill. It went to a back tax buyer. This actually just happened. And the owner was shocked. They had no idea. So you just never know. Now, they're interested in selling. They're in a trust. It's a little different game. But that's how you get the deals ahead of everybody. You don't wait for it to hit the market. A lot of times when it hits the market, you're already out of the deal or you're going to be competing. So sometimes you just say, hey, look, like these laundromats. If you're interested in a laundromat and you drive around your town and you see 10 dumpy laundromats, I would just call the number on the phone for refunds and say, hey, look, are you the owner? Well, my name's so-and-so. I'm interested in owning a laundromat and curious if you wanted to sell. If you don't want to sell, it's great. Maybe I could do a wash, dry, fold business here. Or maybe I noticed there's a little, need a little repair. Maybe you're interested in me leasing the laundromat from you, and I'll run it, and I'll pay you so much a month. We'll work out a deal. You just never know how you're going to get your foot in the door and this kind of thing. So if you don't have a lot of money and you don't have a lot of equity and you don't have a lot of credit, that's a little bit of a way to get into the laundromat. Like if someone came to me and they were credible, and they said, hey, look, I want to run your laundromat at this location, and I'll pay you so much a month, and I'll keep track of them, I would do that in a heartbeat. There's a lot of times that comes up because a lot of people can't afford the business right off the bat. So that's another way you can get into it. As for the bigger property, it just comes down to money, okay? Well, if you're going to get a loan from a bank, you're going to get a mega loan, $2 million, $1 million, you got to have 20% down. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You have 20% down, and you better have a credit score that's up in that high 600, 700 range. I think 650 is the cutoff. You're not going to get it otherwise. Okay, so when I'm buying, I bought a farm just recently. I paid almost $1 million for it. I literally bought that all with the bank's money. okay? And I did a reverse 1031, which is for another video. There's a thing called a 1031. There's also a thing called a reverse 1031 where you do it backwards. I've never really seen anybody talk about it a whole lot on YouTube, but I do them because then I don't have that cutoff window. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So you gotta have that 20% down. You gotta have that high credit score for the big property. If you are a first-time home buyer, if you're in that realm, there's, especially if you're a veteran, there's VA loans. You can pay 3%, 5% down. You can get really long terms. If you are a new homeowner and you qualify, you can get an FHA loan through your bank. And basically that's gonna be that 2 to 3 to 5% down, and it's gonna give you 30 years, and you can buy up to a fourplex. And I've said this in my videos before, if you're just starting out, you're just out of high school, got that first job, buy a duplex. If you don't wanna buy a duplex, buy a fourplex. Get that FHA loan, get into a fourplex. Live in one unit and let the other 3 units pay for you to own that building. They'll pay you rent and pay you to own that building. Sit there, save up all the money you can for a year, invest that in a 401k or something, sock it away, never touch it. And then once you get some equity in that building, then you can go to the bank and use that to buy your next property. Now the one trick with the FHA loan is they'll keep that loan on the fourplex, then they'll take another FHA loan and move to another place and do it again. And you're getting a better deal because I can't get a 30-year loan. I can't get a 30-year loan on duplexes and houses and that because I'm not in that window anymore because of my income. But you can. So you can spread that payment so you can cash flow really well in certain markets. I'm not saying get every loan extended that far out. I am a big fan of paying your debt off. But that's one way you can move up the ladder. That's one way you can get a lot of property. You can do this kind of thing. So that's advice I have to you is, live in a duplex, live in a fourplex, live in a triplex, something where you got income coming in and that place ain't costing you money. Because the last thing you need to do is buy a house and be by yourself and you're fixing up the yard, you're putting a deck on, you're paying for fix up of this house. All that's going to a house that's really not helping you, But if you buy that rental property and live on one side, that will help you. So those are the ways I would go about real estate at an early age. If you don't know what to do, that's what I'd do. Now, my other advice is if you are really like, how did I find this stuff out to start with? I literally play the dumb card. And what I do when I do real estate is, if I don't know something, I will find an expert and I'll just go to them and say, hey, look, I'm just trying to figure this out. How does this work? And a lot of times people can't wait to tell you what they know or how it works. So I went to a bank I never used for a loan, and I said, hey, if I wanted to buy rental property, and I was in college at the time, and the bank's no longer around, it went out of business in '08, they sat down and showed me what I had to do. They showed me what my credit score had to be. They ran mine for me and showed me what mine was. It was good. They showed me how much money down I had to have. They showed me what I could buy, what they would consider okay to sell to me, or consider what I could go out and buy, not sell to me, but buy, because they're not going to loan you money if you don't have income at that time. We had the whole crisis where they didn't care about income justification. But that's what I did. And so when I went to the next bank, the bank I actually used, I knew all this. So I walked in saying, hey, Mr. Banker, here's what I got. Here's my credit score. Here's how much money I got down. Here's my plan. And I even had another caveat. I threw something else in. And they said, okay, we'll give you a loan. Go find a house. Here's your letter of approval. And I went out, found a house. 30 days later, I had my first house. So that's another trick to how to learn how to do this without paying the gurus thousands of dollars, is literally you can go to brokers and bankers and insurance agents, and they'll know somebody. They'll know somebody to have you sit down and you can bend their ear for a few hours. Not everybody that gives you advice is going to have to take money from you to do it. And that's one thing that bugs me when I see people, young people, they don't mind giving up their money for advice they may never use, because a lot of people get real estate advice off the internet or YouTube and all these gurus, and they never do anything with it. What a waste. You would have been better off taking your money, putting it in the stock market, and letting it gain interest in that situation. So, like I said, you shouldn't have to pay for that. I understand why people do, but I'm telling you right now, best advice I got for you is right there. Start small. Start with an area you want to be in. If you want to avoid another mistake, I would say is don't buy the crappy house in the crappy neighborhood. You want to buy a fairly rundown house in a nice neighborhood, but you don't want to buy the worst house. You know, if you can't fix the house up, you're going to have to buy something a little nicer, because in the long run, it's going to be worth more. So why screw yourself? You know, just like these zombie laundromats. If you buy a really bad laundromat and you can't fix it up, I don't care how much money you got or how much time on your hands you got, you won't be able to get it running to make you back money fast enough to go do something else. And that's costing you time, and that's costing you money. So you don't want to necessarily buy the worst. Like, I've passed up deals because they were just in the wrong neighborhood, they were too tore up, and they weren't worth my time. So you see I'm in the shop here. I want to show you something quick before we go. These are the pumps out of that excavator. And I know I showed you that video. I'm going to show you. The reason I got this excavator so cheap is because this pump was all tore up. This pump was okay. But this pump, you can see all these bits. These are shims are all destroyed. This plate here has a crack right there, which shows up. Those things are called pistons. And these are caps that should be on the pistons. Now I just poked myself with it. But you can see how tore up they are, okay? And you might be asking me, what's a good one look like? Well, you can see from the side there, that's a good one. That's what it looks like. That should be flat. Not like this. This wear plate back here is all scratched up. All those are bits and pieces. You can see all the fines in there. This pump got trashed. It's meant for those parts to wear out like that, so I'm not too worried. I bought all those parts. And just like, here's some good ones. These are used ones. Because I even though this pump wasn't trashed yet, I went ahead and rebuilt it, because these brass parts are wear parts. So if that pump, and these were about wore out, you can tell by the indicators, that pump went trashed on this guy. This one wasn't far behind. So we basically put the new wear plates in there, and pistons. This is the shaft, which is okay. But tomorrow we'll have the last bearings here, and I'll be able to put these together. And I know it looks like a mess, but it's pretty well organized, except I shouldn't be doing this on the floor, and I'll probably have 50 comments. It should be a little cleaner, but I am cleaning it as we go, so I don't have any contaminants in the hydraulic system. I put new filters on the machine. But that is the deal with the Cat. The Cat is a flip. I'm actually flipping this excavator. I'm actually going to basically rebuild it. I got 2 or 3 projects on this farm I gotta do. I'm gonna build a couple ponds, I'm gonna build a couple roadways, and then I'm literally gonna sell this thing in a few months and probably get back triple what I paid for it. Well, like always, that's it for this episode. I hope you found it informative. I hope you learned some stuff.